At 11:59 p.m., Prince George is still the grandson of a king. His school books are closed. The corridors outside his room are quiet. Somewhere nearby, Catherine believes her eldest son is sleeping through an ordinary night. But inside the palace, nothing is ordinary. Secure telephones are active. Senior officials are opening transition files prepared long before this moment. Protection teams are comparing routes, residences, and emergency procedures. One folder contains a name that is about to acquire entirely new weight. George. Then the clock strikes midnight. In this imagined first minute of William's reign, no coronation is required for George's position to change. No public announcement has reached the television networks. No crown has touched William's head. Yet the line of succession has already moved. William is king, and George is now the direct heir. At 11:59, he was the king's grandson. 60 seconds later, he becomes the child Britain must protect at almost any cost. Before sunrise, 5 palace rules could begin reshaping his life. The palace is not preparing him for ceremony. It is preparing the institution for a future that eventually follows William. The first surrounds him with a security wall stronger than anything he experienced before. The second reaches into his school, friendships, and the private routines that once made him feel like every other child. The third changes how he travels, where he sleeps, and whether a spontaneous family journey can still remain spontaneous. The fourth transforms every portrait, balcony appearance, and public gesture into preparation for the crown. But the fifth rule is different. It cannot be enforced by a guard or written into a school schedule. It enters the most private relationship George possesses and changes the way William must eventually speak to his own son. We will return to that rule before William's first day ends. For now, imagine a protection officer receiving an updated designation shortly after midnight. George's name moves into a higher priority category. Routes once considered acceptable must be reviewed. Contingency plans are reopened. Every future appearance now carries the weight of preserving the monarchy's next generation. George knows none of this. He remains asleep while adults begin removing choices from his future in order to protect it. That is the first contradiction of becoming heir. The closer George moves to the crown, the less freely he may be allowed to move through the world. By morning, his bedroom will look unchanged. His family will still call him George. His school uniform will be waiting. But outside the door, unfamiliar officers may already be standing in new positions. And when George wakes, the first rule of his new life will have arrived before anyone explains what he has become. At midnight, George does not inherit a crown. He inherits distance from ordinary life. Before William becomes king, George is already high in the line of succession. His future is never entirely private, and the palace has always understood that he may one day carry enormous responsibility. But becoming the direct heir removes one final layer between George and the throne. There is now only William. At the same moment, a succession chart is circulated to the household. George's name sits beneath William's, confirming what the family already understands but has not yet discussed. Every decision involving George acquires constitutional weight. His health matters differently. His safety becomes more urgent. His education is no longer judged only by what helps a child develop, but by what may prepare a future sovereign to understand history, public duty, and national institutions. Even an ordinary mistake can attract extraordinary attention. A difficult school day becomes a headline. A moment of frustration becomes evidence strangers use to judge his character. A friendship can be examined for influence long before George is old enough to understand why anyone is watching. That is the first hidden cost of moving closer to the crown. George does not simply become more important. He becomes more interpretable. Every expression can be given meaning he never intended. Charlotte and Louis feel the change as well. Their brother still sits beside them at breakfast. He may still joke, argue, and compete with them exactly as before. But the institution now looks at the 3 children differently. George represents continuity. Charlotte becomes the sibling who may one day support a king. Louis grows up knowing that his brother's future was decided before any of them could choose their own. Catherine may attempt to preserve equality inside the family. William may insist that titles remain outside the children's private rooms. Yet the palace cannot treat George like everyone else when the monarchy's future rests so directly upon him. Then comes the first morning briefing. Officials do not begin by discussing ceremonies or constitutional lessons. They begin with risk. Which routes does George regularly travel? Which locations appear too predictable? Who has access to his daily schedule? Which family activities now require additional protection? The questions are practical. To William and Catherine, they sound deeply personal. Each answer identifies another piece of their son's life that may no longer belong entirely to him. And this is the twist. George's first change as heir is not something he receives. It is something placed around him. Before he attends a ceremony, studies a state paper, or understands the meaning of succession, the palace begins building a stronger wall between George and the outside world. That wall starts outside his bedroom door. George notices the first change before anyone explains it. The officer outside the corridor is unfamiliar. Another waits near the vehicle entrance. A third speaks quietly into a radio while studying a schedule that was rewritten during the night. Nothing appears alarming. That is the point. Royal protection is designed to make danger invisible. Routes are assessed, crowds are monitored, and alternative plans are prepared so the protected person can move without seeing the machinery surrounding them. But George's new position changes the scale of that machinery. As direct heir, his safety is no longer only a family concern. It becomes part of preserving the continuity of the crown. Every predictable journey, public appearance, and repeated routine may receive greater attention. In this imagined morning, William and Catherine receive a private security assessment. The first recommendation concerns George's daily route. It has become too familiar. The second concerns public events where William and George might appear together. Contingency plans must account for their positions in the succession. The third concerns information. Fewer people should know George's movements before they occur. Each recommendation sounds responsible. Together, they begin constructing a wall. Catherine asks whether all of it is immediately necessary. She understands the risks, but she also understands her son. George notices changes even when adults avoid discussing them. More officers, altered vehicles, and canceled routines will tell him that something has happened before his parents find the right words. William faces a harder calculation. As George's father, he wants normality. As king, he will be blamed if normality creates unavoidable vulnerability. He approves the revised protection plan. By breakfast, one familiar journey has been changed. George asks why they are taking another route. The answer is deliberately simple. The palace is adjusting arrangements after the transition. But George looks through the window and recognizes that the adults are watching the road differently. Charlotte notices too. She asks why George leaves first and why an officer checks the doorway before the others follow. No one wants to frighten the children, but silence gives the changes more power. That is when protection becomes visible. The vehicle does not stop where it usually stops. An officer exits first. Another checks the entrance. George waits for a signal before stepping outside. Only seconds are added. Yet those seconds contain his entire new reality. He can still go to school. He can still see friends. He can still laugh with Charlotte and Louis when the formal day ends. But movement now comes with permission, timing, and people arriving before him. This is Rule 1. The institution will protect George's future, even when that protection narrows his present. And the security wall does not end at the palace gate. It follows him into the one place William and Catherine hoped might remain ordinary: his school. School is supposed to be the place where George can briefly forget what waits outside its gates. Inside a classroom, an answer is either correct or incorrect. A football match is won or lost. A friendship grows through shared jokes, ordinary disagreements, and moments that carry no constitutional importance. But becoming direct heir makes that ordinary world harder to protect. The security review now reaches beyond routes and vehicles. Officials consider who knows George's schedule, which activities take him away from controlled locations, and whether photographs from private events could reveal patterns about his movements. The questions are necessary. Their consequences feel personal. In this imagined school day, George receives an invitation from a close friend. A small weekend gathering has been planned away from London. The other children need only ask their parents. George's invitation enters the palace system. Catherine wants to accept immediately. William hesitates, not because he doubts the family, but because the crown has taught him how quickly one ordinary photograph can become a lasting, serious security problem. Where will the event take place? Who else will attend? Can the location be secured without disrupting the family hosting it? Will other parents photograph the children? Could George travel without drawing attention to everyone around him? An invitation that takes another family 5 minutes to accept now requires conversations between parents, staff, and protection officers. George waits for an answer while his classmates discuss the weekend as though his presence is already decided. This is where Rule 2 becomes painful. The palace does not intend to separate George from his friends. William and Catherine may fight to preserve his education and private relationships. Yet every effort to protect normality makes his difference more visible. Class trips create the same problem. A museum visit, sporting event, or overnight excursion may require advanced planning that changes the experience for everyone. Teachers receive additional instructions. Routes are assessed. Arrival times shift. George may enter with the class, but he is never entering under the same conditions. Digital life creates another wall. A harmless group photograph can reveal station is reviewed. Officials examine the destination, transport, accommodation, and emergency routes. Protection teams ask whether William and George should travel together and whether their movements create unnecessary concentration of risk. The family sees a weekend. The institution sees the succession moving in one vehicle. In this imagined discussion, the first route is rejected. It is too predictable. A second option requires advance officers at the destination. A third changes the family's arrival time so significantly that Charlotte immediately asks why they cannot leave together. No answer feels suitable for a child. Catherine proposes traveling separately from William while keeping the children together. Another concern emerges. George's new importance may require different planning from his siblings. That is the moment the journey stops feeling like a family escape. George hears only fragments, but children understand more than adults expect. He sees maps on a table. He notices one vehicle assigned to William and another marked for the children. He asks whether he has done something wrong. Catherine answers immediately, "Of course not." But the question remains in the room because the arrangements make George look responsible for changes he never requested. This is Rule 3. Spontaneity becomes a security decision. A journey requires approved routes. A residence may need advanced preparation. International travel invites diplomatic and protection considerations. Even an unplanned visit can expose patterns the palace would rather keep private. The crown does not forbid George from traveling. It makes every journey heavier. For George, the frightening part is realizing nobody can promise this is temporary. By late afternoon, the weekend is approved with conditions. Departure times change. Staff will arrive first. William and George will not use the original route together. The children can still go. Yet the trip they imagined no longer exists. And here is the twist. The cancelled route is not the decision that hurts Catherine most. The final plan places George in a separate security sequence from Charlotte and Louis for part of the journey. It lasts less than an hour, but it introduces a division Catherine has spent years trying to prevent. One child is no longer being protected only as her son. He is being moved as the heir. When the family reaches its destination, another palace decision is waiting, where George must stand in William's first official portrait, and what the image will tell the world about the childhood now disappearing behind his title. The portrait appears harmless. One room, one camera, William, Catherine, and their 3 children standing together at the beginning of a new reign. But royal portraits are never only family photographs. They communicate hierarchy before a single statement is released. Distance, posture, and placement tell the public who represents the present, who supports the crown, and who carries the future. In the first proposed arrangement, William stands at the center with Catherine beside him. George is placed close to his father. Charlotte and Louis stand slightly farther outward, preserving balance while making the succession visible. Catherine notices immediately. At home, the children are 3 siblings. Inside the frame, George has become something else. An official explains that the image must communicate continuity. George's position beside William is not a judgment of affection. It reflects his new constitutional importance. The explanation is reasonable. That does not make it painless. George is shown where to stand. The adjustment is less than a few steps, yet it moves him symbolically away from Charlotte and Louis and toward the institution waiting behind William. George asks why he cannot remain between Charlotte and Louis. William pauses. He explains that the photograph must show what changed at midnight. George understands the words, but not why history requires this separation inside his own family. The camera begins capturing images. George holds the expression he has been taught to maintain in public. Charlotte looks toward him briefly. Louis shifts before being gently repositioned. For the photographer, it is a minor interruption. For Catherine, it exposes the difference between the portrait the palace needs and the family she sees. This is Rule 4. George's public image no longer belongs entirely to George. Every appearance can become evidence of preparation. A wave is examined for confidence. A serious expression becomes maturity. A moment of uncertainty is interpreted as pressure. The more visible George becomes, the more strangers believe they understand him. And the harder William and Catherine must work to protect the child behind the symbol. Then comes the twist. The final photograph does not look severe. It looks warm, composed, and reassuring. George appears comfortable. The family looks united. The image succeeds precisely because viewers cannot see what changed before the shutter closed. They cannot see the altered journey, the unfamiliar officers, the invitation waiting for palace approval, or the conversation about where George must stand. The portrait preserves the appearance of normality while quietly confirming that normality has ended. Once the session finishes, George expects to leave with Charlotte and Louis. Instead, an official asks William whether George can remain for a short private conversation. The palace calls it age-appropriate preparation. William understands that it is something more. For the first time, the crown is about to enter a conversation that once belonged only to father and son. The room chosen for George's first conversation as heir is deliberately informal. No throne, no ceremonial uniforms, no stack of government papers waiting on the table. Only William, George, and one trusted official carrying a simple folder. The palace understands that George is still a child. Any preparation must reflect his age, education, and emotional readiness. The purpose is not to burden him with state business. It is to explain why the world outside the room has begun treating him differently. The official opens the folder. Inside is a succession chart. William's name appears first. George's sits directly beneath it. George has seen versions of this before. He knows that his family is different. But the chart now contains no name between his father and himself. That empty space changes the conversation. William explains that becoming heir does not mean George must suddenly behave like an adult. He will continue attending school, spending time with Charlotte and Louis, and learning gradually. But some things will change. He may receive more public attention. Certain journeys will require additional planning. Ceremonies may place him closer to William. Over time, he will learn more about the responsibilities carried by the crown. George listens carefully before asking the most direct question in the room. Does this mean he will become king soon? The question reminds William of his own childhood, when future duty was rarely distant from family life. He understands that the answer George needs is emotional and personal before it is constitutional. William answers no. The answer is immediate, but the question leaves a silence behind it. William realizes that every lesson about succession contains a truth no parent wants a child to carry. George's future role is connected to a day when his father can no longer perform it. The official quietly closes the folder. The rest of the conversation belongs to them. This is where Rule 5 begins. Although George cannot yet see its full shape, the palace calls the meeting preparation. William experiences it as the first time the institution has entered his relationship with his son. Before midnight, William could explain royal life as something surrounding their family. Now he must explain that the family's future rests upon George in a way it does not rest upon Charlotte or Louis. George asks whether he can tell them everything discussed in the room. William says he can explain how he feels, but some future conversations may remain private. Another small separation appears. The meeting ends without ceremony. George leaves carrying no document and receiving no new title inside the family. Yet William remains behind. On the table is the succession chart, still open to the line joining their names. The fifth rule is not written there. Its real meaning will emerge through the choice William must make next, whether to prepare George as king or protect him as his son. After George leaves, William remains alone with the chart. For the palace, the line beneath his name represents continuity. For William, it represents his son. That difference shapes the next decision. Officials propose a gradual preparation program. Age-appropriate lessons about history and public service, carefully selected ceremonial appearances, and regular conversations explaining how the monarchy functions. Nothing in the proposal appears unreasonable. The danger lies in accumulation. One lesson becomes a schedule. One appearance becomes expectation. One private conversation becomes another responsibility George must carry while the rest of his classmates are thinking about school, sport, and the weekend. William knows the institution cannot wait until adulthood to explain everything. An unprepared heir would face pressures far greater than a child introduced gradually to duty. But William also understands what happens when preparation becomes identity. He remembers moments when adults discussed his future as though he were not in the room. He refuses to repeat that pattern. George will be told why decisions are made, and he will be allowed to say when the weight feels heavy. If every achievement is praised as evidence of a future king, George may stop knowing which ambitions genuinely belong to him. If every mistake is corrected through the language of duty, childhood itself begins feeling like a rehearsal. The palace asks William to approve the program. He does, but with conditions. George will not receive formal preparation every week. Lessons must remain flexible and must not replace time with Charlotte and Louis. Public appearances will be chosen for meaning, not simply visibility. No official may discuss George's future role as though his present life has already ended. Then William removes one recommendation entirely. The draft proposes that George attend a lengthy ceremonial rehearsal without his siblings so he can become familiar with standing beside the king. William crosses it out. If George attends, Charlotte and Louis will attend where appropriate as family. The crown may distinguish the succession, but William refuses to let every experience separate his children. It is a small victory, yet William knows he has only delayed the separation, not defeated it. This is his impossible double role. As king, he must prepare the person who follows him. As a father, he must prevent that preparation from consuming the boy standing in front of him. Every decision protects one future while potentially damaging another. When William finally returns to the family, George appears relieved. The official folder is gone. Charlotte and Louis are discussing something unrelated to the palace. For a moment, the room feels ordinary again. But Catherine sees the marked proposal in William's hand. She notices the approved lessons, altered appearances, and one crossed-out rehearsal. William has protected part of George's childhood. The document shows Catherine how much of it is already being negotiated. After George leaves, William remains alone with the chart. For the palace, the line beneath his name represents continuity. For William, it represents his son. That difference shapes the next decision. Officials propose a gradual preparation program. age-appropriate lessons about history and public service, carefully selected ceremonial appearances, and regular conversations explaining how the monarchy functions. Nothing in the proposal appears unreasonable. The danger lies in accumulation. One lesson becomes a schedule. One appearance becomes expectation. One private conversation becomes another responsibility George must carry while the rest of his classmates are thinking about school, sport, and the weekend. William knows the institution cannot wait until adulthood to explain everything. An unprepared heir would face pressures far greater than a child introduced gradually to duty. But William also understands what happens when preparation becomes identity. He remembers moments when adults discussed his future as though he were not in the room. He refuses to repeat that pattern. George will be told why decisions are made, and he will be allowed to say when the weight feels heavy. If every achievement is praised as evidence of a future king, George may stop knowing which ambitions genuinely belong to him. If every mistake is corrected through the language of duty, childhood itself begins feeling like a rehearsal. The palace asks William to approve the program. He does, but with conditions. George will not receive formal preparation every week. Lessons must remain flexible and must not replace time with Charlotte and Louis. Public appearances will be chosen for meaning, not simply visibility. No official may discuss George's future role, as though his present life has already ended. Then William removes one recommendation entirely. The draft proposes that George attend a lengthy ceremonial rehearsal without his siblings so he can become familiar with standing beside the king. William crosses it out. If George attends, Charlotte and Louis will attend where appropriate as family. The crown may distinguish the succession, but William refuses to let every experience separate his children. It is a small victory, yet William knows he has only delayed the separation, not defeated it. This is his impossible double role. As king, he must prepare the person who follows him. As a father, he must prevent that preparation from consuming the boy standing in front of him. Every decision protects one future while potentially damaging another. When William finally returns to the family, George appears relieved. The official folder is gone. Charlotte and Louis are discussing something unrelated to the palace. For a moment, the room feels ordinary again. But Catherine sees the marked proposal in William's hand. She notices the approved lessons, altered appearances, and one crossed-out rehearsal. William has protected part of George's childhood. The document shows Catherine how much of it is already being negotiated. Catherine reads the proposal twice. The language is careful. Every recommendation emphasizes continuity, preparation, and George's long-term well-being. Nothing says that the palace is taking her son away. Yet each paragraph claims another piece of his time. An additional lesson here, a ceremonial appearance there, a revised journey, a stronger security procedure. Individually, every change can be defended. Together, they begin constructing a childhood organized around a future George never chose. Catherine understands duty. Becoming queen places new demands upon her as well. But an adult can identify pressure, negotiate boundaries, and understand why sacrifice is necessary. George is still learning what sacrifice means. Her first concern is time. Preparation must not consume evenings that belong to the family. George must retain activities with Charlotte and Louis that carry no royal purpose. His friendships cannot be treated only as security variables. School must remain education, not merely training for the crown. Her second concern is language. Officials may describe George as the heir inside formal discussions. At home, he remains their son and his sibling's brother. Catherine does not want every conversation to remind him that his future differs from theirs. Then Charlotte enters the room. She has noticed the changed vehicles, the portrait arrangement, and the private meeting from which she and Louis were excluded. She asks whether George must now do everything with William. Catherine says no, but the question exposes a cost the palace proposal never mentions. George's preparation can separate all three children, not only burden him. Charlotte may begin interpreting privacy as importance. Louis may experience security arrangements as preference. George may feel guilty for changes he did not create. Catherine adds another condition. Whenever possible, family events must remain family events. The institution may prepare George, but it cannot turn Charlotte and Louis into spectators of their brother's future. William agrees. The decision protects something real, though neither parent pretends it solves everything. This is Catherine's private cost of becoming queen. She has not lost George. She still sees the same child at breakfast and hears the same voice in the corridor. But she can already see the crown beginning to claim his time. That evening, preparations begin for the family's first public appearance of the new reign. George's position has been marked beside William. Charlotte and Louis will remain close, but the constitutional message must be unmistakable. Catherine adjusts George's clothing and reminds him that he does not need to perform perfection. He only needs to walk beside his father. George asks whether everyone will be watching him now. Catherine cannot honestly say no. Outside, cameras are already gathering. The palace sees the first image of continuity. Catherine sees the first public test of every boundary they established together. So she tells him the one thing the palace cannot guarantee. Whatever the crowd sees, he will never be only an heir to her. Section 10, the fifth rule revealed. At 11:59 p.m., George was the grandson of a king. 24 hours later, he walks beside one. The doors open, and William steps toward the cameras. Catherine follows with Charlotte and Louis. George moves into the position marked for him beside his father. To the public, the image communicates stability. To George, it contains every change the day has delivered. Unfamiliar officers stand beyond the frame. His school invitation still depends upon security arrangements. The family journey has been divided into routes. The portrait has moved him closer to William and slightly away from his siblings. And somewhere inside the palace, a succession chart joins his name to his father's. The 5 rules now form one complete transformation. Rule 1 controls the space surrounding George. Rule 2 reaches into his education, friendships, and privacy. Rule 3 makes every journey part of a calculation. Rule 4 turns his public image into a symbol of continuity. But Rule 5 changes something none of the others can touch. William must eventually speak to George not only as his son, but as the person who may one day follow him. That is the final rule. It does not remove love from their relationship. It adds history, duty, and an unspoken future to conversations that once belonged only to a father and child. William can delay formal lessons. He can reject unnecessary appearances. He can protect weekends, friendships, and time with Charlotte and Louis. He cannot remove George from the succession without changing the institution itself. That is the truth beneath every compromise. As the cameras begin, George looks toward William. The gesture lasts less than a second. William responds with a nod, not from a king instructing his heir, but from a father reassuring his son. George steps forward. The crowd sees confidence. Catherine sees courage. The palace sees continuity. Only George knows how unfamiliar the position feels. And this is the final twist. The crown does not take his childhood through one dramatic order. Nothing is confiscated at midnight. No official declares that life has ended. Instead, freedom disappears in smaller pieces. A changed route, a photograph requiring approval, an invitation carrying conditions, a journey planned by security, a private conversation that must remain private. Each decision is defensible. Together, they create the life of an heir. When the appearance ends, George returns to Charlotte and Louis. The 3 children leave together, and for a moment, the constitutional arrangement disappears behind the family. But tomorrow, the officers will return. The schedules will remain. Preparation will continue. George has not become king. He has become the future the palace must organize around. And the closer that future moves toward the crown, the harder William and Catherine must fight to preserve the child inside it. Because the first privilege George surrenders as direct heir is not a residence, title, or possession. It is the freedom to live without every ordinary choice carrying the weight of what he may one day become.